Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and his tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomenon my entire life.
And I'm Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations, from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that we know the government has recovered non-human technology.
Or at least we will, once we see what's in AARO's next report.
It raises a natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
And they may still be unlikely, but even if it's new science and not aliens, woo!
It's a very exciting time.
And a quick reminder before we get into it, if you want to support what we do here, best way is by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
Yeah. Oh, man. Chuck, it feels like we were just recording last week.
It does, doesn't it? Funny.
How are you doing, man? You got any plans for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, doing good. I actually just had Thanksgiving. I was invited to a vegan Thanksgiving, Friendsgiving potluck. And I got the notification today. I was like, great, this is gonna be awesome. I need something for next week. And then I looked at the date and I was like, oh shit, it's for today. Oh shit, it's for 2 hours from now. I don't have time to cook. But yeah, it was lovely. Met a lot of wonderful people. But here's the thing. I learned a thing that is relevant to our discussion. Scott and I have a long-standing debate about the correct amount of vegetables that belong on a plate.
God damn it.
And so this was at my opinion is that it should be a little bit higher, but I found the outer boundary. I did find the outer boundary today.
Okay.
Because today I was at a vegan Thanksgiving potluck, a thing I have not done before. And boy, I found the outer edge of the number of vegetables you want to have on your plate. And
was it 100%?
Well, yeah, it was like more than 100% because it's Thanksgiving, right? And I just came home and like normally when I eat vegan, I like come away feeling like, oh god, I feel like weirdly light, even though I just had a giant piece of like cheesecake. I feel like light and good. I did not feel that way today. So there is a limit, apparently.
No, this debate that Chuck is referring to. So when Chuck and I worked together years ago, he's vegan, I'm not. He would like leave a burrito on his desk. I'd be like, haha, I'm going to steal your leftover burrito. And he would text me back. He's like, it's vegan. Good luck. I'm like, oh, darn it.
Damn it.
But it got to the point, I don't remember what the initiating thing was.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it got to the point where every time I would eat like food and there were visible vegetables on the plate, I would text Chuck a photo and like, see, I'm eating vegetables. I eat vegetables.
It'd be like a plate entirely of meat with like one tiny broccoli in it. And be like, see, I eat vegetables.
Yeah, broccoli beef, man. That's the way it should be. All right. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you may notice that our lighting is a little off. I've got this like glaring white light in my face. Chuck's looking a little darker. That's because we're recording at night because Chuck was asleep all day after eating his vegan Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And also, I have a totally new microphone, totally new setup, and I did not have time to test it because I was napping. So hopefully this
I hope you can hear us.
It's going to be great. YOLO.
All right. Chuck, it is that time again. The hottest release of the year just dropped.
Ooh, okay. What is it? A new like Mord Fusting track or new Fast and the Furious? Maybe did GTS just release a new flavor of kombucha?
Now, even better than all of those, we just got our hands on the 2024 annual UAP report from the Pentagon's All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. Brr, 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 brr.
Okay. Yay. Oh man. We need those little like party poppers that streamers
Yeah.
have. Yeah. Anyways, that's wonderful. They have a new director this year, right?
I do indeed. Dr. Jon Kosloski.
Oh, and we're very excited about Dr. Jon Kosloski, right?
Moderately excited.
Okay. I'm very excited because wasn't he like Lou's buddy?
Apparently he was on the UAP task force. Remains to be
Yeah.
seen how strong an endorsement that is.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so this is like his first time in the spotlight, right?
It is indeed. He dropped the new report. He hosted a media roundtable, and he
Oh.
appeared in the Senate for a UAP hearing with Senator Gillibrand, who was
Ooh.
asking him how AARO is doing, all in the space of a week.
Wow. Okay. And getting in front of UFO Mama Bear, Gillibrand would be pretty rough. How did he do? He has fairly small shoes to fill.
Yeah, the bar is really, really low for any measure of improvement here. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
I'm not prepared to pass judgment, but
Okay.
before we dive into the new report, I was getting ready to kind of summarize what was in the report.
Hmm.
And I had a little premonition that I was going to start talking
Mhm.
about the new report, and I would reference the old report, and you would have that blank look in your eyes. Like,
That
I
I
have
do.
no memory of this. It happened more than
Yeah.
3 weeks ago. It's gone forever. So,
Yeah. It's
even
exactly
worse
how
now
it
that you're
works.
full of vegan Thanksgiving.
All right.
So, I thought we would do a quick recap of the previous reports, just to kind of remind ourselves of how AARO has positioned themselves over the
Yeah.
previous years with regards to the UAP topic. So
Cool.
I want you to roll your mind back to June of 2021, when the UAP task force released their preliminary UAP report. Chuck, I want you to project your mind back to June of 2021, when the
Mm.
UAP task force has just released their preliminary report on UAP for Congress.
Okay. Editor, add in Wayback Machine noises. So Scott, you mentioned this is the UAPTF
Mhm.
report, not Arrow. Is that because Arrow didn't exist yet?
Bingo. AARO had not yet come about. The UAP task force was kind of the placeholder agency. So
Got it.
what people may not remember is early in the pandemic, Congress was able to get some UAP laws on the books because Congress was incredibly motivated to pass pandemic related laws, and
Yeah.
you kind of slip stuff in. So some of this UAP stuff kind of slipped through by the skin of its teeth.
Mm.
But they were able to get that the Pentagon needed to start a UFO office, and they needed to
Okay.
release a public report on everything the government knew about UFOs.
Right.
So the UAP task force was the earliest placeholder version of that, basically getting the ball rolling for what would become AARO and releasing this first report. So yeah, June of 2021, this came out.
Yeah.
It covered 16 years of history
Oof.
from November of 2004 to April of 2021. It covered 144 UFO reports received during that time, of which they were able to resolve one, which was a
Hey.
balloon.
All right. Good job.
Yeah, nice work, buddies.
Okay. Cool.
They found 21 reports of, quote, unusual flight characteristics.
That's interesting. So, are these like the five identifiables or
The 5 observables that Lou talked about.
observables?
Kind of,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah.
So they didn't give a lot of
Okay.
details, but they
Okay.
said, quote, some UAP appeared to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion.
Yeah. You know, I'm remembering this, and I remember feeling kind of excited that there was actually some details about
Hmm.
UAP.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
feel like yeah,
Yeah, there
okay,
was a
cool.
version of this report they could have put out where they were just absolutely
Yeah, right,
strictly neutral. Yes, there are things that we've seen we don't know what they are. They're probably nothing. And like leave it at that. But
right,
coming out and actually saying some of them move in ways that we cannot explain, it was a step further than I had expected them to take.
right.
Um, they also talked about flight safety. Now, this had been the watchword that Lou
Mm-hmm.
Elizondo and Chris Mellon had been using when they were hammering Congress and going, we got to do something about this. Flight safety
Yeah.
was the way you get people who were not interested in alien stuff to take
Mm-hmm.
seriously the idea that whatever they are, probably Russian, they're up in the air and they're getting
Right.
in the way of our jets,
Absolutely.
and that's a big deal, and no one's paying attention to it. Shouldn't we pay attention to it? so,
Right. Yeah,
uh,
I
yeah,
remember
so
those
this
days.
preliminary report does say, talk about flight safety, and it says there were 11 reports of near misses with UAPs, although it provided no details.
Yeah, yeah. So I remember talking about that with you. I don't think we had our podcast yet.
Right.
But yeah, it's like that's when we could only talk about flight safety. Like that was the only
Yeah.
thing we were allowed to talk about. It's kind
Yeah,
of
it was
wild how times
basically
have
the
changed.
only way that this became a legitimate topic of
Yeah,
conversation. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
right.
and last of all, they did mention the idea that it might be foreign technology. So
Mm,
this is interesting because this was kind of putting the stake in the ground. Again, you could picture a very neutral one where they're like, we don't know what they are, full stop.
right.
Or even that they strongly imply that they're probably foreign. Instead,
Yeah,
what they said was, quote, we currently lack data to indicate that any UAP are part of a foreign collection program or indicative of a major technological advancement by a potential adversary.
yeah. So wasn't this like basically the government saying it's alien without actually saying it's alien? Like we know it's not us. We know it's not the Russians or the Chinese.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, the report was a little bit of a step back. All the report
Yeah,
says is we have no evidence that they're
sure.
Russian or Chinese. But
Hmm.
people giving interviews around that time were being very clear. It's not Russia, it's not China, and it's not us. So dot dot dot. they they wouldn't quite
Okay.
say the next part, but they would kind of walk you right up to the conclusion. Um,
Yeah. Who is who is the author of these?
I'm not actually sure. Jay Stratton
Okay.
was head of the UAP task force. I don't know if
Okay.
he wrote this or his team did, but yeah.
Okay. And we're big fans of Jay Stratton, right?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a lot of information about Jay Stratton. Most of what we hear
Okay.
about him comes through Lou Elizondo.
Right.
Lou Elizondo is a big fan of Jay Stratton. Jay
Yeah.
continued to run the UAP task force. He had been working with Lou in OSAP and ATIP, and he took
Yeah.
over ATIP after Lou left and eventually ran the UAP task force.
That's who I
So
was
anyway,
thinking about earlier. I was mistaking Jay Stratton and Jon Koslinski. Um,
Kozlowski, yeah,
Kosloski. Yeah. I'll get it. Give me a couple
you'll get
years.
it.
We'll
Yeah.
get this.
So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that little hint of willingness to engage with, I don't
Yeah.
know, maybe they're alien,
Yeah.
because basically from this point forward, they locked in that there is no evidence of extraterrestrial origin line. Um, so we're
Yeah.
going to fast forward now a little bit to January of 2023 when the first AARO report for 2022 was released.
Right. Yeah. That it was like super late, wasn't it?
It felt super late. In hindsight, it was 3 months late, which now
Yeah.
seems kind of laughably like, why did
Yeah.
we even care? But yeah, like it was due on Halloween of 2022, which is when we started this podcast. Um, And our 6th episode of the podcast was called "Where is the 2022 UAP report?" Because we were all kind of eagerly waiting for it. It's due on Halloween. It's going to be out any day now, y'all. And they just kept not coming out and not coming out. In their defense, AARO was created in July of 2022. So they kind of had to hit the ground running. Being able to get a report out within 6 months with an entirely new staff and new directorate, honestly,
pretty rough.
I ain't mad about it. In hindsight, I'm like, yeah, it's fine. So AARO's first report covered 6 months from March of 2021, where the previous UAP report ended, through August of 2022. It covered 500 it reported that there were now in AARO's records 510 total UAP report. 366 of those were new, and they had resolved at this point 195 cases.
Wow, that is, I'm just like scrolling up. That is a notable increase. Like the previous was 144 over 16 years.
Yeah,
now
and a big part of this is there was a huge stigma around reporting. And one of the things that they did do when they set up AARO was send out word like, you are supposed to be reporting UAP and you should be reporting them to AARO. Now, they are still struggling with stigma. Even in today's report, they said, we're still dealing with certain agencies don't want to file reports, but it's definitely getting way, way better, as we'll talk about when we get to the new report. But yeah, cool. So they got 366 new reports in 6 months and resolved a bunch of them. They still talked about flight safety. They said, quote, UAP pose a safety of flight and collision hazard to air assets, potentially requiring aircraft operators to adjust flight patterns in response to their unauthorized presence in the airspace, operating outside of air traffic control standards and instructions. To date, there have been no reported collisions between U.S. aircraft and UAP.
It's this is interesting. They're not. It doesn't feel like they're talking about air safety in the same way. Like they're trying to downplay it, or I don't know.
Yeah, there's a slight difference there, right? Before it was, there were near misses. This is a big deal. Now it was like, well, there's never been a collision.
Yeah. Right.
They did also mention something for the first time. Quote, there have been no encounters with UAP confirmed to contribute directly adverse health-related effects to the observers.
Right. Yeah. I remember thinking how odd this was. Like, it just felt like it came out of nowhere. Can you remind us the background on how this got added in?
It definitely feels out of nowhere, right? Like everything else is kind of nuts and bolts, and they're like, hey, there are things in the sky, and sometimes we see them, and sometimes our planes almost hit them. And then it's like, also, they've never made anyone sick. Like, okay.
Wait, what?
My UAP have never made anyone sick shirt is raising a lot of questions answered by my shirt.
Yeah.
But yeah, long story short, it came from people like Lou Elizondo who were sharing stories with Congress of people being injured by UAP, which we talked about in the last episode. And Congress basically added a line in the NDAA that said, hey, in that UAP report, you have to talk about whether you know if anyone's ever gotten injured by a UFO.
Yeah. Although, considering what we talked about in the last episode, seems like they might just not.
No, they definitely won't. Now, they do always have this really funny postscript. So it's like, there have been no encounters that have caused health effects. Parentheses. The Pentagon realizes that health effects may take a long time to manifest, and so we will continue monitoring. Like, they're very careful to not say there haven't been any and there never will be. And it's like, well, we don't have any records of them.
Okay. It does feel like one of those mandatory postscripts, like, this is not meant to be construed as financial advice, or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the last thing I want to mention from this first AARO report is, once again, they mentioned the idea of foreign technology. They said, quote, AARO will continue to investigate any evidence of possible foreign government involvement in UAP events.
That's it? Is there more to that? It feels like it was like cut off in the middle.
Nope, that was it. They just kind of said, "Yep, we acknowledge that you asked us to look into this."
Okay. I suppose with 3 months, maybe they just didn't have time. I
Yeah.
don't know.
All right, so let's get to last year's report. So the
Okay.
2023 AARO report actually released in the proper calendar year. So hey, big step up.
Huge
Came
progress.
out, yeah, came out in October of 2023.
Okay.
Now, there's something interesting about this one. October 2023. This is the first AARO report to drop after David Grush went public.
Oh. Okay. Right. Yeah. As I recall, they didn't say anything about crash retrieval programs or really like most of the stuff that David Grush talked about, right?
Absolutely correct. I think they were kind of
Yeah.
hoping the whole thing would just blow over.
Now, now it feels so like naive to think that might happen.
Yeah. Now, they had
Yeah.
one kind of escape hatch to lean on. David Grush came out in June of 2023. The error report covered 8 months from September of 2022 to April of 2023, which
So
in
how
hindsight felt
convenient.
the cutoff was in April. The report came out in October. It sure felt like they were like, hey, can we backdate this report to come
Yeah,
out, not
just a
cover
little bit,
David
yeah.
Grush's claims? And April
Oh,
feels
and
like even earlier, but that would have been because of his ICIG complaint.
right, and now Kirkpatrick isn't in the hot seat, and so he never had to report about any of that stuff. Fascinating.
Well, he got into it in the historical
Oh,
report. Yeah. But yes, in this particular report, they appear to have timed the period they were covering very carefully so that they would not have to address David Grush's allegations.
hmm.
So yeah, it covered 8 months. They added 291 new UFO reports, bringing their total up to 801.
Wow.
And question mark on how many were resolved. They've reported this in both of the previous reports. They just didn't mention it this time around. Now, I
Amazing.
know that they probably didn't resolve zero because Darrow has been very clear every time you talk to them that a lot of the reports they get are very clearly identifiable as balloons, stars, etc. And I don't disagree with this, right? The kind of
Hmm.
number we've always heard kicked around is 90% of UFO reports are mundane,
Sure.
but it's those 10% we really want to dig into. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a little surprising looking back to not see them trumpet, hey, we got 291 reports and we resolved 91 of them immediately.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't mention it, which is very unusual.
Yeah, and now with that null value in there, we actually can't add up anymore. We need like we need some another report to give us a reset to say how many
Right.
total are unresolved because we actually cannot infer anymore.
Well,
Very
and being
clever.
a nerd like me, you'll appreciate this. So I've been
Yeah.
trying to pull out some numbers as I go through the old
Yeah.
ones. Okay, so they say, here's how many reports we received this year. Here's how many total reports we have in there. And those numbers add up and stuff.
Hmm.
When they say we resolved this many cases, it is not clear whether that is a running total, the
Yeah.
number of cases they resolved this year, or the number of cases they resolved of the new cases this year. Like, there's just
Right.
no details given. So I want to see like a big reader board that's like, we have received 801 reports and 700 of them have been resolved, or something like that. They
Yeah.
just don't have that information.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting.
Now, there was one other new interesting bit of information in here. They added a chart showing the domain that the report came from. And they
Hmm.
said overwhelmingly, these were reports of aerial craft. 290 of the reports were of in the air domain, one was in the maritime domain, and they had
Hmm.
zero reports from space or transmedium.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's new, and I love that we've got some wet aliens going on.
Yeah. So, as far as I can tell, they started reporting on what domains the reports were
Yeah.
from because of Congress directly expanding the scope out of aerial. And I don't remember exactly when it
Right.
was, but there was a story that we had heard either this year or the year before about how the I think it was the Air Force said,
Air
we don't
Force, yeah.
have to give you anything because you said aerial craft and these
Right.
ones aren't aerial or something like that. Like
Yeah.
they had some nitpicky thing, and that's why they changed
Yeah.
the acronym to Anomalous instead of
Yeah.
aerial.
Yeah.
So anyway, transmedium is the giveaway here, that this is them
Mhm.
directly addressing another little line that Congress penciled into the NDAA. Okay, you got to tell us about the health effects, and you have to tell us if any of them are transmedium, which is the thing we're
Yeah.
hearing about. Transmedium
And
craft, they're like, yeah, we don't have any.
transmedium is like air to water to whatever, right?
Air to water is what
To
most
space.
people talk about, but they have been very clear. Transmedium means moving from one domain to another. So it could be from air to space, it could be from space to water, whatever. The point is, it
Doesn't matter.
starts in one and ends in another.
Okay, cool. I'm excited to see when they have like transmedium to like solid earth.
Yeah,
It's only a
totally.
matter of time.
Yeah. So getting back to our ongoing topics that they always talk about. First up, we
Mm-hmm.
had flight safety. Last year, they said, quote, none of these reports suggest the UAP were exhibiting anomalous characteristics, maneuvered to an unsafe proximity to civil aircraft, or posed a threat to flight safety to the observing aircraft.
Wow. So this is like a complete walk back. Nothing unusual. Nothing to see here. No threats. Like
Yeah.
that's a
So not
big change.
only were there no collisions and no near misses, there
Yeah.
were no flight safety risks and
Right.
no anomalous behavior
At all.
at all. Yeah,
Interesting.
that definitely feels like, nope, nothing to see here, folks.
Yeah.
They mentioned health effects again. I think you can probably guess what they said. Quote,
Mm-hmm.
to date, no encounters with UAPs have been confirmed to have directly contributed to adverse health related effects to the observers.
Hmm. Yeah, feel like the word confirmed is carrying a lot of weight in that sentence.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a load bearing word for sure. Yeah. And last of all, they mentioned foreign tech, kind of. Quote, although none of these UAP reports have been positively attributed to foreign activities, these cases continue to be investigated.
Yeah. I mean, I know that they just mean there's no like conclusive proof and they're going to keep looking because Congress told them to, but it's hard to not read that as despite a lack of evidence, we're going to keep checking if they're Russian or Chinese because boy, that would be a lot easier.
It would be so much easier, you guys. We looked really hard for a little Russian flag.
See anywhere. Like, oh, look, those pixels could be it. No, nothing.
All right. So that's our recap. As
Yeah.
you can see, there's only 3 reports, so it's not like a
Yeah.
huge wealth of data. But already, I think we see a pretty clear pattern from the UAP task force being willing to kind of acknowledge that UAP are up there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them behave weirdly, and there are flight safety concerns. To the last AARO report, just completely pulling away from all
Yeah.
of that. No health safety, no flight risks, probably not foreign, but we're not giving up.
Yeah.
Very different vibe between the
Yeah.
2021
Super
report and the
different.
2023 report.
I can't
So,
wait to hear 2024. New
well, let's
director,
get into
new
it, buddy.
direction.
Yeah. So the 2024 report just dropped now in November of 2024. It covered 13 months, which is the longest
Hey,
one yet, from
that
May of
alone.
23 to May of 24. They
Yeah.
received 757 new reports, bringing the total to 1,652. And this year they resolved 292 cases.
Wow. That is a huge jump from
Mm-hmm.
like 801 the previous year or like 501 before that. Like, that's crazy. They like
Yeah.
almost doubled it.
Exactly. They almost doubled it. So Kosloski had his media roundtable I mentioned, and
Mm-hmm.
he mentioned this. He said the cause for the big increase in numbers, because I think he was kind of trying to get out ahead of it. There's this idea like, oh, wow, there's more UFOs.
Yeah.
He said, "We are engaging more with the services, helping them
Mhm.
understand what qualifies as a UAP and how to report it. And we're getting more reports of the anomalous activity. We don't believe that there's necessarily more anomalous activity. It's just that we're getting greater reporting. And the FAA is providing us reports now as well."
Yeah. Yeah. Totally makes sense. As we figure it out, we're going to see more reporting. Um,
Yeah. And
cool.
getting the
So
FAA involved is a really positive step.
big
That's
deal.
great.
Yeah. So, so less than half of them were resolved.
Mhm.
Do you think they're still digging into the rest?
Yeah, so he talked about this a little bit in the report and also in the media roundtable. The report says AARO determined 21 cases merit further analysis. The remaining 444 cases lacked sufficient data to facilitate analysis and were placed in the active archive, where they will
Mm,
be held for pattern of life and trend analysis or re examined if additional data becomes available. Archived cases may be reopened and resolved should additional information emerge to support analysis.
okay. So actually, reading this a second or a third time now, I think they just gave us our answer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, aside from like we don't know how many of the previous reports merit further analysis. I'm putting that in air
Mm-hmm.
quotes, but we can assume under Kirkpatrick the answer is zero. Um,
Yeah. This is certainly
but
the
they,
first time they've mentioned
yeah.
it.
So everything else seems to have been put in. I don't know. In Scrum, we'd call this the ice box, the
Uh-huh.
like place where stories go to die. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so okay, interesting. So I think 21 out of 757 is like, what is that, 3%?
Yeah, give or take.
I have no idea if that's a lot or a little. Kind of
Right.
seems like a
And kind of
lot,
going
but
back to what Lou and everyone has said, they've warned us before that, like, yeah, most of the reports are not unusual. Maybe
yeah.
5 to 10 is a number that we hear all the time. So that doesn't
Okay.
feel out of line to me. It's maybe a
Okay.
little low, but like,
Yeah.
honestly, that's fine. The part I
Hmm.
care about is focus on those weird ones because what we
Yeah.
often get is the vibe that they're really focused on explaining the easy ones and
Hmm.
chalking those up as a victory while not talking too much about those weird ones. Those would just put them over there. Yeah, we're looking. Don't worry about those.
Yeah. Interesting.
So
And maybe,
in some
maybe
sense,
the,
maybe this is a positive thing that they are
yeah,
acknowledging that some of them are worth looking into and talking about
right.
their processes for the ones that they don't have enough info for.
Yeah. And I would imagine that uh, as they increase reporting, like moving it into the FAA, I bet that that percentage number is actually going to go down a little bit. Like we may still
Right.
only have 21 next time, but we'll have 4 times as many cases that they looked at.
Absolutely. And he'll talk about that a little later that
Yeah.
things like Starlink are making it harder because they're getting a lot more anomalous reports that turn out to have mundane answers that aren't
Yeah.
necessarily obvious.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
I hadn't thought too much about this, and then I saw someone online talk about this that put it into context for me a little bit. Nick Schifrin, who is a PBS defense correspondent, said, "Today's AARO report acknowledges 21 cases that merit further analysis, and Kosloski called some of them true anomalies. He said the
Mm.
cases he was particularly interested in were spread out over the last year and a half. Some include video, some had multiple eyewitnesses, and they exhibited different morphologies, including orbs, cylinders, and triangles. One of the cases, he added, has been happening over an extended period of time."
Oh, I would love to know more details about the ongoing one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't suppose we got any details, did we?
No.
No.
He
Okay.
did
It's
in the
ongoing.
Senate hearing
Okay.
tease a few of the cases that they're currently investigating, but nothing about that one, which,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
very tantalizing. This idea that I think it's easy to kind of dismiss them as it's all pilots seeing balloons and stars and one-off things. But the idea that something has been happening persistently for a long time kind of
Yeah.
immediately takes it out of a ready explanation. So I'm very excited
Yeah.
about that one.
I feel like that's actually, um, it's not an observable, but it's like a bonus point. Um,
Yeah.
like happening over time or happening in a large swarm or something like
Mhm.
that just makes it more interesting.
Well, it's also just it's a data collection thing, right? Like
Yeah.
a one-off, a snowflake is by
Yeah.
definition an outlier. Unless you have multiple
Yeah.
snowflakes that match the same pattern, you're looking for trends, you're looking for through lines, you're looking for things that repeat. A single one-off case that happens once, but 70 different people experienced the same thing, that's interesting.
Right.
Similarly, a case that happens to one person, but happens repeatedly over time, opens the possibility of setting up observation suite and
Right.
paying attention to it and documenting it and doing more than just like, well, this thing happened one time.
Yeah. Yeah. I assume that's what they mean when they said pattern of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Talking about the domains again,
Mm-hmm.
once again, the vast majority were aerial.
Sure.
708 of the reports were air domain.
Mm-hmm.
49 of them were space domain with
Ooh.
zero maritime and zero
Well,
transmedia.
I like the maritime ones, but that's cool that there's space ones.
There
What?
are. Yeah.
How? Like, how are they doing that? We aren't running the shuttle anymore. Um,
Yeah. So,
which
uh,
fitting of our
quote,
t-shirts.
AARO notes that none of the space domain reports originated from space based sensors or
Yeah.
assets. Rather, all of these reports originate from military or commercial pilots or ground observers who reported UAP located at altitudes estimated at 100 kilometers or higher.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I suppose we don't have a huge number of pilots up in space right now,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it would be amazing if we could get some satellite. I have no concept of how many satellites we have up there that are looking sideways instead of down at the ground or up at
Mhm.
space. It's not like
Yeah.
it's not a thing we really do a lot. It's interesting.
You know, you kind of hit the nail on the head. And this is one of the things that Kozlowski talked about, and other people have talked about too, is it's tempting to go, man, we've got all these fighter jets out there with the greatest sensor systems in the history of the world. Why don't we have more video and more photos? And one of the things they talk about is all of those sensor platforms are incredibly refined for a very particular task, often tracking missiles.
Yeah.
We want to find a very fast moving hot object and lock onto it very quickly. We don't necessarily do so good at say stationary objects that are
Yeah.
hovering in place against the wind. And this was one of the things that came up when they talked about the Chinese spy balloon that came overhead. NORAD had actually fine-tuned their radars to ignore signals below a certain speed threshold because it wasn't what they cared about. They cared about
Yeah.
ICBMs.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so one of the things that worries me about this is that pilots estimating that something is above 100,000 kilometers,
Mm-hmm.
like 40,000 feet is pretty darn high.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think the F-22s, they scrambled for the balloons, like well peaked out of their maximum range at 60K.
Mm-hmm.
But 100 kilometers is what is this? 328,000 feet.
Yeah.
Um, that's like 10x more. Can
Yeah.
they really estimate something being 10x higher than them?
Well, we're going to talk about this a little bit, but yes, there is a challenge with estimating distance and speed without
Right.
reference points, right?
Yeah.
When we
Yeah.
see an enemy fighter jet, we can estimate speed and distance because we know the size of the fighter jet.
Right.
When we see
Yeah.
a white blob or a metallic sphere,
Yeah.
well, is that metallic sphere 10 feet wide and pretty close to you and moving ungodly fast? Or is it a million feet wide and it's out in space? You know, that line can get projected out. Any point in between could be true. If you don't have some other frame of reference, like it passing in front of or behind something, it can be really difficult. And they're going to kind of seize on that logic to debunk a few things later. But yeah, I don't want to downplay it. It is really, really tricky to estimate this stuff. The only thing I will say is if there's anyone that I would trust to be able to make a best guess at it, it's trained pilots, both commercial and military. This is kind of what they do. They're used to seeing things in the sky and acknowledging how high they are and where they are and how it moves in relation to them. But your point absolutely stands.
I am imagining like a co-pilot sitting there with like an astrolabe, like measuring out. Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they talked about flight safety as usual. Said, quote, U.S. military air crews provided 2 reports that identified flight safety concerns, and 3 reports described pilots being trailed or shadowed by UAP. Only 1 FAA report mentioned a possible flight safety issue during the event, although buckle up, it's a big one. In this instance, a commercial aircrew reported a near miss with a cylindrical object while over the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of New York. AARO continues its research into an analysis of this case.
Wow. Okay. Hey, well, I mean, A, scary. B, we're back. Like we got military pilots being chased. We got civilian near misses. Like we're back in the saddle.
The chasing thing is a real interesting difference. So
super interesting.
Before we have heard reports about there are craft that are just out there in our ranges. And occasionally we've heard about pilots having to divert around them, but it's never really seemed like they were like interacting with us the way that, say, you know, a Russian fighter pilot would. Like they just happened to be in the same airspace. Or we sometimes hear about near misses. There's a story about 2 fighter pilots flying and this thing came flying right between them. It didn't touch them, but, you know, very scary. Or we hear about things like the Tic Tac where they're like interacting with it, but it's very clearly, or this idea of UAP chasing or shadowing a fighter jet, I can't even begin to imagine how unnerving that would be. To be out on, I assume, like a patrol or a training mission, and there's this unknown thing that's just holding position behind you, just following you. What a weird experience. So that's new to me, at least.
Yeah, I don't even know how I would feel about that. Like, it hasn't caused any problems. It's just hanging out back there, but like, I don't know. Yeah,
very
creepy.
Weird. Very
I feel like
weird.
if you were getting followed, imagine like driving home and like there's just a metal sphere trailing you 10 feet behind.
Right?
It's like,
terrifying.
It's not doing anything. It's just, it's just there.
Right? Well, and Lou talked last time about like nonverbal communication, you know, like what message are they sending? Like, hey, I can keep up with you. I'm right here. You can't shake me. Like,
I'm not touching you.
That could be interpreted 100 ways, right?
Yeah. It's like when kids are in the back of the car, like, I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you.
That's right. Yeah.
Dad.
I'm just going to swing my arms, and if you walk into them, that's not my fault. We do get our annual update on UAP health effects. Quote, AARO received no reports suggesting any observers of UAP suffered any physiological impacts or adverse health effects.
No change there then. That's good. Still not talking about
change. which
Well,
is they lost the weasel words. So last year it was,
oh,
there were no confirmed reports to
mm,
verify that this caused this for sure. You know, like they were leaving it open that there were reports that hadn't been confirmed, or reports were like, yeah, someone got sick, but we don't know if it was caused by the UAP. This has
yeah,
been very clear. It's saying the same thing, but without the weasel words. There have been no reports suggesting any UAP observers got sick.
yeah,
Okay, you know, that's a more clear statement, and I feel a
yeah,
little better about it.
yeah. But what about the what about the efforts to extract technology from UAP?
Well, you
We're
know.
mentioning that.
They talked about foreign tech. Quote,
Okay.
to date, AARO has received no indication or confirmation that these activities are attributable to foreign adversaries. None of these resolved cases substantiated advanced foreign adversarial capabilities or breakthrough aerospace technologies.
Hmm. I feel like there's a few more weasel words, but it's still low on my weasel meter.
Mm-hmm.
Like last year, they were leaning super hard into the confirmed evidence, but
Mm-hmm.
uh, no indication. Um, I don't know. It seems like it's a little more clear that it's really that it isn't foreign tech.
Yeah. What I like about it, again, I think there are fewer weasel words. Last year, it was
Mm-hmm.
very much like there's no confirmed evidence, but we're going to keep looking. Like there's this kind of vibe like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but I mean, it probably is. This year, it feels a little more clear. We have nothing indicating that these things are Russian or Chinese, guys.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that's worth pointing out is you or I seeing something up in the sky may not be able to say whether it's Russian or Chinese. You know, like, who knows? You know, like, I don't know. It's a thing. Somebody built it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would expect a group like AARO to have access to the latest intel reports
Yeah.
of what we know about current Russian and Chinese tech. There's always the possibility that it's some deep black, massive, unexpected advancement of theirs or even ours. That's always there. We can't deny that. But
Mm-hmm.
I do appreciate hearing a more straightforward, kind of back to the original UAP task force. It ain't Russian and it ain't Chinese.
Right. I I have to admit, I still think it's going to be a software bug, but that's only because I'm a software engineer and it's all terrible up here. So
Yeah. Interestingly, in addition to the foreign technology statement, we also got a statement on alien technology.
oh,
Quote, it is important to underscore that to date, AARO has discovered no evidence of extraterrestrial beings, activity, or technology.
and who is that important to note to?
Is it important? Yeah, it kind of feels like it's important to his boss.
Uh,
Like,
yeah,
make sure you tell him it's not aliens, man.
yeah, right. Like,
I
huh?
will say the UFO community is having a little bit of trouble squaring the circle of the new AARO director on the one hand saying very clearly there's no evidence that UAP are foreign tech. Hey, great, that means they're probably alien. But there's also no evidence of extraterrestrial technology. Well, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, which is it, man? Like, help us out here.
I mean, yeah, it's that is true though that they're they, wouldn't even know what to look for to confirm that it was extraterrestrial tech. So
Yeah, yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, like I have no evidence that the duck I saw at the park is uh, Russian or extraterrestrial. Like,
UFOs are piloted by ducks, folks. You heard it here first. They're all
yeah,
Russian spy alien ducks
yep, it all
piloting UFOs.
100% makes sense. Remind me to tell you
They
about the ducks I saw earlier. By the way, they were very cute.
they also kind of sort of addressed David Grush's allegations in
Oh,
the briefest way possible. Quote, Arrow possesses no data to indicate the capture or exploitation of UAP.
okay.
AARO is working with mission partners to formalize a process in the event UAP material is captured, drawing on current U.S. government capabilities and operating procedures.
So, interesting. So they can't get away with ignoring it anymore. So, like, what is the bit about planning for if a UAP is captured? Like,
Yeah.
I feel like there's...
Yeah, the community went a little bit wild for
I
this. This
bet.
actually came out a while ago. Sean Kirkpatrick let it slip that AARO is developing their own like crash recovery procedures. And was like,
Okay.
but he said there were no aliens. This isn't actually new or surprising. It's
Okay.
actually in AARO's mandate to plan for how to deal with UAP tech if it is recovered. So we get this jarring little moment of like, there is no crash retrieval program yet. Like, give us a little time.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, and we have no evidence of aliens or extraterrestrials, but by God, if we get one, like,
yeah, if whatever shows up,
we know.
We're gonna be ready, buddy.
We know exactly where to put it.
That's right next to the duck pond. There was a new section that I think you'll be intrigued by. Quote, AARO received a total of 18 reports regarding incidents near U.S. nuclear infrastructure, weapons, and launch sites, all categorized as unmanned aerial systems, or UAS. 2 instances involved longer flight times of 1 to 2 hours. 1 incident recovered a crashed UAS that was given to local law enforcement. AARO has no further information about the crashed UAS.
Okay, wait. I don't think I've heard the term UAS before. Is this like drone, or what does it even mean?
I believe so. Confusingly, there's a point later on where Dr. Kosloski says drones or UAS, which kind of implies there's distinguishing. But when I went to look it up, as far as I can tell, UAS is the generic term for drone. It's an unmanned aerial system. Quadcopters, Raptor drones, piloted drones, all of those. The point is, it's a flying thing that ain't got a person in it.
Okay.
But
I thought that was a UAV. But
well, and that's the other thing is what is the difference between a UAV and a UAS? So I'm a little unclear on this, but I think broadly speaking, you can hear unmanned aerial X and think drone. That seems to be how they're using it.
Yeah, I guess I had sort of missed at first that the U meant unmanned, not unidentified, which is kind of an interesting distinction. Though, how can you determine? It could be very tiny aliens.
Very small, like duck-sized.
Like ducks. This is such a dumb joke, and I love it. So they got a set of UAP reports. One of the reports said that the thing crashed, but they gave it to the cops. And AARO didn't ask any questions about this because it was small.
Sounds like it. Yeah, AARO seems to be like, it's just a drone, you guys.
Huh. Okay. How? I have a lot of questions, but like, how did they know it was a drone? Like, did AARO confirm? Why was there a UAP report at all if everyone knew it was a drone?
These are all excellent questions that AARO provides no answers to.
Okay, cool. Great.
Now, here's the thing. Drones are in the UAP news a lot lately, and we're going to talk about it a little more lately. But, like American military bases and nuclear sites have been getting a ton of drone flyovers. And we did a report on this earlier this year, and it's very confusing because on the one hand, everything about how this information is presented to the public makes it sound like these are Chinese quadcopters. There's nothing to worry about here. On the other hand, the military has a fairly comprehensive answer to most drone platforms. They have things called drone busters, which are going to mess up the wireless communication signal between the drone and the operator. They have freaking net guns. They have small arms fire. They have many, many options to take down drones. And we see this in the context of the reports we talked about earlier. It was mostly around ships. So Navy ships would have these drones hovering off board. Believe me, the Navy guys know how to take down a thing that is hovering off board. They weren't able to, which raises a question of what these things are, that none of our deterrence strategies are effective. So I don't want to get all breathless and be like, aliens are surveilling Langley. I don't know. It probably is foreign activity. And when I hear them reported as hovering in the air and they kind of look like quadcopters, you know, like Occam's razor, they probably are quadcopters. But there are some unanswered questions here about these weird quadcopters that are somehow immune to every defense mechanism we have. So I'm not trying to say they're alien. I'm not trying to say they're Russian or Chinese. I'm saying they're unusual. And there are still open questions. And there were open questions 6 months ago when we talked about it. And there are still open questions now. There was just a report in the news about multiple bases, RAF bases in the UK that had the same drone overflight and same thing. Deployment measures were put in fact. And in that case, F-22s were scrambled.
Wow.
You don't scramble an F-22 to take down a quadcopter. So what kind of drones are these? So lots of questions.
How would an F-22 even like a drone can't be going that fast, right?
and not more to the point, something that can't go at the speed of an F-22. The F-22 is not a good answer to engage with it.
Like
I don't know. I don't want to dive into it too much. We're probably going to have to do another episode on drones soon because this topic will not die. But this idea that AARO got UAP reports from nuclear facilities, very interesting, lines up with what Lou was saying about how UAP are very interested in nukes. But they're kind of clearly trying to lump it into this ongoing reporting about drones that are likely foreign technology, but also behave in a weird way. And all of your questions about like, who determined this thing was a drone? If it was a drone, I understand why AARO didn't look into it further, but I don't understand why it was reported to AARO as a UAP. So lots of questions about procedure and policy here, about something that may turn out to be mundane, but still makes me raise my eyebrow.
Yeah, totally. Interesting.
Yeah. Now I mentioned Starlink. They got their own little paragraph here in the
I get
new
that.
AARO report. It said, quote, AARO increasingly receives cases that it is able to resolve to the Starlink satellite constellation. For example, a commercial pilot reported white flashing lights in the night sky. The pilot did not report an altitude or speed, and no data or imagery was recorded. AARO assessed that this sighting of flashing lights correlated with a Starlink satellite launch from Cape Canaveral, Florida, the same evening about 1 hour prior to the sighting. The sighting occurred in the known orbital path of the satellites.
Yeah. Yeah. Have we talked about why those look like they're blinking? It is fascinating.
It's something about them dipping in and out of the atmosphere, right?
It's even less mundane than that. Like they only blink once, and generally what's happening is they pass from so like, you know, there's a band where the Earth is in shadow. Well, the higher up you go, that band is a little bit delayed. And so you get into this spot where it can be totally dark above you, but a satellite is still in daylight. And so you see this line of super bright things that then pass into shadow. And so it looks like they wink out.
Just right. What you get is what looks like a blinking light in one spot in the sky, but is actually a train of satellites passing through the light boundary one at a time. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And I get it. It looks really weird, but it sounds like this is just a nightmare for UAP programs. Like,
Oh, for real. Yeah. And the
yeah.
UAP community at large, too. People post photos all the time on Reddit that get the likely resolved badge
Hmm.
because they turn out to be Starlink. I think most people don't really have a good understanding of the incredible, shocking number of satellites that Starlink has put up or how weird they can look.
Yeah. So yeah, I looked it up right before this. As of September, there's something like 7,000 Starlink satellites.
Incredible.
Compared even more compared to something around 8,200 total.
So it's not just more than half. It's like the vast majority of satellites are Starlink.
I mean, these numbers could be totally wrong, but
Sure.
these were very quick Googles. But I mean, I think that's actually true. We
Yeah.
like you look
So
at all
anyway,
the other launch platforms, and they just aren't
Starlink
going up.
got a section of the UAP report. This is one of those rare
Yeah,
cases where I'm inclined to hand it to AARO. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds awful.
it's going to be
I
complicated.
I would not like to be in an area where my job was to resolve reports of weird lights in the night sky right now.
Yeah, yeah, but I think people will learn. Um,
Yeah.
they'll do some
Um,
education materials.
Now, there was one last section in the UAP report that I think you in particular will find very fascinating. They
Okay.
had a section where they talked about sensor platforms.
Mm.
Quote, AARO has begun collections using a prototype sensor system, Gremlin, for
Mm.
detecting, tracking, and characterizing UAP. Gremlin demonstrated functionality and successfully collected data during a test event in March of 2024. The next step for Gremlin is a 90-day pattern of life collection at a site of national security.
That sounds very exciting to me. You were right. So, but also because it's military, I assume Gremlin is an acronym. Do we know what it stands for?
Dude, I went down a rabbit hole on this. I would
Yeah.
love to know the answer. I was not able to find an answer. First of all, they started talking about these gremlin sensors like a year ago. But the press at the time always capitalized it like a proper noun. They were gremlin with a capital G and the rest was lowercase. Okay, weird name for a sensor system, but whatever. And then this year's AARO report all of a sudden has it in all caps like an acronym, but they
Mhm.
never define it. And none of the media reports that are talking about it do either, including the like military blogs that tend to be really on it with this stuff. The only thing I could find is they mentioned that they worked with Georgia Tech to develop it. So maybe the G is Georgia?
Hmm. Okay. Well, I mean, a little disappointing, but I suppose it does mean we get to make up our own acronyms, so that's fun.
There you
Um,
go. Have fun in the Discord, guys.
yeah, totally. So, this sounds a lot like Avi Loeb's Galileo project or Project
It
Galileo.
sounds very similar.
Yeah. Do we know anything about the platforms, whether they're the same kind of thing or
A little bit.
okay.
They include an almost worthless diagram in the AARO report. I
Okay.
got a little more information from Warzone, a military blog that had a dedicated article about Gremlin. They said Gremlin includes 2D and 3D radars, long range electro optical infrared sensors, GPS, satellite communications, aircraft tracking systems, and radio frequency spectrum monitoring. It all feeds into a central node where the data can be fused to get a better sense of what's out there. The system is something of an integrated air defense apparatus in a box,
Hmm.
allowing for multiple sensor types and open source data to be captured on single targets within its view.
Open source data, huh? That that could be very exciting.
Could be.
Yeah. Where are they putting it? Like, where's the first one?
So this is really interesting. At the media roundtable, someone asked him that.
Yeah.
And Dr. Kosloski said, it is currently deployed. We would rather not say exactly where because we want it to be an unbiased test and don't want to invite folks to come and do flyovers and test against the system.
Yeah, because
We
that's
chose,
exactly what I wanted to do.
absolutely. We chose this specific location because of the environment. We expect there to be a lot of variety in the types of things that we're going to see, and there had been UAP reports in the general area. So we're trying to build a baseline. So right now we have this geographic bias where we're getting reports near national security sites, but we also have a bias from pilots and other security personnel. So we want to have a better understanding of what normal looks like near those national security sites, and then eventually we'll be expanding our baseline investigations to other areas in the US to look at what normal looks like away from national security sites.
Yeah. Okay, that's amazing. 100% this is at Langley. And I can't wait to find out what those drones are.
Yeah.
So has Avi Loeb said anything? Like, is he pissed? Is he delighted? Personally, I'm delighted, but like I'm just delighted that instead of complaining about having bad data, they're like deploying something and working to get
Yeah.
better data. And I really hope we get to see it.
Absolutely. We haven't heard from Avi Loeb yet, which is surprising because Avi will not miss any opportunity to speak about stuff. He put out his own statement to Congress before the congressional hearing. It wasn't read in Congress. Like, nobody asked him to do it. He was just like, hey, Galileo project's still a thing. We're about to drop some data. Like,
Okay. Cool.
I suspect Avi would be happy about it. I don't think he's the type to be jealous. He started Galileo project because as a scientist, it seemed really obvious to him. The problem we have as civilians is all of the information about this is classified. Well, the sky isn't classified, so why don't we just start looking in an organized scientific way? And I kind of love that approach. So if he hears that AARO is doing the same thing, I doubt he's going to be mad. I think he's going to be like, yeah, I told you, it makes sense.
Good. Yeah, I hope so. As long as they give us the data so we can verify it ourselves.
Yeah.
Then
I wouldn't hold your breath on that part, but we'll see.
Yeah.
So yeah, after the report was released, Kosloski held a media roundtable and answered questions for a bunch of reporters. Most of what he said was just a variation of what's already in the report, so I'm not going to waste your time with the bulk of it, but there was one bit that I thought was very interesting. Someone asked him to respond to Lou's opening statement at the congressional hearing, where Lou said, "Let me be clear, UAP are real." Now, Lou then went on to talk about crash retrievals and other stuff, but that was his opening statement. So one of the reporters quotes that to Dr. Kosloski, who responds, "Absolutely agree. UAP are real. We have received 1,600 cases. A large number of those are unresolved, which means we don't know exactly what they are. It's definitely not all just drones and unmanned aerial systems. There are interesting cases that I, with my physics and engineering background and time spent in the intelligence community, do not understand. And I don't know anybody else who understands them either."
Wow. That is such a huge change from Kirkpatrick's like open hostility to the topic.
Right? It kind of sucks that this like very measuredly neutral statement is like, oh my God, he's on our side.
Yeah, but it's all steps, man. Like someone from the DoD just said UAP are real. Like, come
Exactly.
on.
And this is it kind of feels like the heart of this show, right? Is I'm always saying, like, Chuck, did you hear that the US military said that UFOs are real? And you're like, really? And then we start talking about, you're like, oh, okay, they didn't say aliens are real. They said there are things in the sky. And we've always got this song and dance moving forward to the point where now we're saying, now that we know the government has recovered non-human tech, but absolutely agreed. It's just nice to get these kind of table stakes raised every now and then. At this point, the head of the Pentagon's UAP program said point blank, UAP are real and we don't know what they are. And in the report, he's very clear, we have zero evidence suggesting that these are foreign technology. Yeah. That is a great line in the sand to draw. We're not going backwards from there.
Yeah. And there's 21 that are very interesting to look at.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
That's cool.
We did get a nice quote from our oldest fan of the podcast, Chris UFO Daddy Mellon, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. He said, "The fact that we now have a federal requirement to report UAP to an office led by a brilliant and open-minded scientist, a scientist willing to admit that some UAP appear genuinely inexplicable and anomalous, is a huge step forward. However, we clearly have a long way to go before we can assume that AARO itself, much less Congress or the American people, is receiving all the relevant UAP data collected by America's numerous cutting-edge air and space surveillance systems."
Yeah, but I love Chris Mellon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I agree. AARO may not be the cause of the problem.
Yeah.
Maybe
They were definitely
exacerbating.
part of the problem under Kirkpatrick. Let's be very clear. They were not helping things.
Yeah.
But I will admit, after that statement and after reading the report, I was feeling kind of cautiously optimistic about Kosloski.
Wait, was?
Well, let's talk about the Senate UAP hearing. So we joked in the last episode that they dropped the AARO report at the same time as the House UAP hearing. Mm-hmm. Now, who knows, right? Why anybody does anything. But there was a feeling in the UFO community that perhaps AARO released their UAP report, which, to be clear, still very clearly says there's no evidence of extraterrestrial technology, at the same time to give Congress people who may be asked questions an excuse to kind of like lower the temperature of the debate, because everything that was happening in the hearing was very exciting.
Yeah.
I didn't actually see that happen, but maybe. I don't know why they do anything. Was the report due now? That doesn't seem to have particularly driven them in the past, but I just don't understand. So again, I was feeling a little optimistic. Let's see how the guy does, because you may remember a year or two ago, Senator Gillibrand pulled Dr. Kirkpatrick up in front of her in the Senate and grilled him about AARO. Yeah. And she was asking a lot of very pointed questions like, do you have everything you need? Because we were hearing all these reports about how they didn't have Title 10 authorization and they didn't have clearance to do this, and they can't break anyone's non-disclosure agreements. And Kirkpatrick was like, we have everything we need. Every door is unlocked. We're all good. So at that point, we nicknamed her UAP Mama Bear, because it sounded like she was a little protective of this program that she had fought to get set up. So AARO has a new director. So she announces, I'm going to hold another Senate UAP hearing where once again, I will call the director of AARO up to task to explain what they have been up to, how they're doing, whether they have everything they need. There was an interview between Matt Laszlo of Ask a Poll and Senator Gillibrand before the Senate hearing. And I'll get to the quote that I actually want to share, but there was this funny exchange at the very beginning of it, that because Matt just includes the raw audio dump of his interview. So Matt says, "Are you watching the UAP hearing in the House at all?" And Senator Gillibrand says, "No, what are they doing? Tell me the topic." And Matt says, well, they've got Lou Elizondo, like 4 whistleblowers, UAPs, kind of broadly. She says, did they say like the government has a program and they're hiding it? And Matt goes, yeah, that's what some of the testimony is. You'll have to go back. She goes, any new details? And Matt says, well, they keep saying we can only answer that in a classified setting. And then it just says in parentheses, Gillibrand lets out a disappointed laugh.
Oh god. Yeah, okay. So the senators, they're just like us.
Just like us. So yeah, the actual quote that I wanted to share, Senator Gillibrand talking to Matt Laszlo about her upcoming Senate hearing said, we're doing the hearing specifically focused on what happened at Langley and some of these massive drone strikes we're having all across the country. Strikes is clearly not the right word. I think she probably had Ukraine on her mind. We are not seeing drone strikes at U.S. military facilities. We are seeing hovering drone surveillance.
Okay, cool. That was going to be my first question.
Yeah. She said, and some of the information that's been publicly available about those is very concerning. We don't know whose they are. We don't know what propulsion they use. We don't know the tech. We don't know it. It's not off-the-shelf stuff. So that is what I'm very focused on.
Yeah. So, like, not off the shelf is like, she's implying these aren't commercial drones or standard quadcopters or anything, right?
I'm interpreting here. I will fully admit. I believe it's more than that. Senator Gillibrand, I should have written down what bodies she's on. She's in the intelligence committee, the intelligence committee and the armed forces committee. I believe she's in both. I might be wrong about that, but regardless, if anyone in the Senate is poised to know what tech foreign nations have with regards to drones, Senator Gillibrand is one of them. So when she says it's not off the shelf, I think she means not off the shelf. Not only is it not like a DJI drone up there, but it's also not like a stock Chinese or Russian or US spy drone. It's something different.
Got it. So I just asked GPT. I said she's on Armed Services, the Select Committee on Intelligence, also the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee, and the Aging Committee.
All right. Well, one of these things is not like the other, but all right, go off.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, this kind of ties into our earlier discussion about how, like, I don't know what the drones at Langley and the other Air Force bases and nuclear facilities are, but whatever they are resistant to our anti-drone defenses, and they're scrambling jets after them in some cases. So that to me is my reading on they're not off the shelf, is her kind of acknowledging the same thing. Like, I don't know what they are, but they're not like the kind of thing that we know how to deal with.
Yeah. So how did Kosloski respond to that question?
So before the Senate UAP hearing, but after Senator Gillibrand got interviewed, Kosloski held his media roundtable, and he said that AARO doesn't investigate drone incidents. Quote, once we know that it's a UAV or UAS of some nature, we then hand that responsibility off to one of our partners. Langley is a great example. It was known to be UAV activity, so we were there in a supporting role, but it was not our responsibility to address that. Those investigations are conducted by someone else, and we're focusing on the truly anomalous.
Okay. I wonder if they just don't have the resources to investigate that many things, or like, I don't know how many drone incidents there are.
It's actually different. AARO's mandate explicitly says we don't want you investigating things that are identified. Like, the instant you find out it is a bird, it is airborne clutter, it is a Russian drone, it is not a job for AARO anymore. They're very clear about that. So my read on this is Kosloski pushing back a little bit. Like, he heard Gillibrand's going to ask him about drones at Langley, and he's like, whoa. We don't do drones. It kind of feels like a kid who got a peek at the teacher's test and is like trying to get his foot in the door ahead of time. Like, oh, nope, that's not us. That's the other guys down the hall.
Yeah, but it's still curious. Like, if it's still unidentified and like curious, I guess that's the problem.
Well,
does it have one of the 5 observables?
If it is identified as mundane technology, it no longer qualifies for AARO. The kind of intent there is you're really looking at the weird stuff and what they can't quite bring themselves to say, the non-human stuff. If a drone crashes and we don't know who made it, but it is very obviously of human manufacture, and it's not like an advanced technology, it's not doing like, sound of speed jumps that, quadcopters can't do. If it
Right.
just looks like normal tech and we just don't happen to know who made it, that's not a good use of AARO's time. So my
Okay.
read
Yeah.
on it is
Makes
it's not a
sense.
resourcing thing. It's literally a mandate thing.
Okay. Yeah. No observables, no investigation.
Right. Now, what's funny is, so Gillibrand says, we're going to ask about drones at Langley. Kosloski says, we don't do drones.
Mm-hmm.
Gillibrand, I think, heard that, and in her opening statement seemed to respond. She says, as incidents at Langley and elsewhere have demonstrated, unmanned aerial systems, or UAS, continue to pose significant threats to our national security. In addition to safety of flight issues these UAS create for our own pilots and aircrew, the UAS present clear and undeniable counterintelligence concerns around some of the most sensitive airspace. While standard UAS are not part of AARO's mission, your work on sensors at military installations across the country will be critical to making sure that we have the domain awareness necessary to accurately identify and track these objects. I expect your office to also pay close attention to any anomalous characteristics that these systems could present in the future.
It's like, I'm not mad, just I expect more of you in the future.
So my read on this is her saying, like, look, we put that clause in there so you guys wouldn't get distracted investigating mundane shit. I didn't want
Yeah.
a report at the end of the year saying AARO spent 800 hours investigating flying garbage bags. The
Right.
instant you resolve something, take it off your list. That was the intent. But now I'm having to come back and say, but that doesn't mean that you can take some things and go, it's probably mundane, and just call it a drone and take it off your desk. Like,
Yeah.
until you know, it's
Yeah.
still anomalous. So it definitely feels like there was a little bit of a push and pull here. I don't know, but that's my read on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I think you're probably right.
Yeah. Kozlowski's opening statement, again, he kind of briefly summarized everything that was in the AARO report and like, hey, here's all the things we did this year. Last year, AARO worked with the DoD's Joint Staff to issue guidance to defense personnel worldwide on how to report UAP observations and is working with the military services regarding implementation. AARO has also launched a public website that features UAP imagery, case resolutions, material analysis, archival records, and more. These are only a few examples of AARO's recent progress, and we're just getting started.
I feel like they're leaving out a lot of things, like all the investigations into UAP. They seem like, I don't know, they seem like okay steps to me. I
You have a more
particularly,
charitable read on this than to me.
yeah,
I was
okay,
like, that's two things, buddy. It's like,
really,
these are just some of the many things we've done. We did
yeah,
this and we did that.
yeah, yeah, all right,
Okay.
sure.
Okay. What else
What
did
other
you do?
things? Tell me about some
One
of
of
these
those things
many.
was a website, buddy. That doesn't count.
All right,
It was
it's a
like we
cool website.
reactivated our Twitter account. Ooh.
Have you looked at the website though?
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's a mess
Okay,
like all government websites are, but for a
okay,
government website, it's fine. There's information on there. I was able to
okay.
find the previous year's reports,
Hmm.
like,
I mean, that's
eh.
actually, from what I recall, that's actually kind of a surprise. Didn't we have to use
It's
the
true. But
web
here's the thing,
archive last
right?
time?
You are you are cheering them on because the bar is so freaking low at
Yeah,
this point.
it's
Like,
true.
oh, they have
True.
a functional website. Like, that shouldn't be listed on your accomplishments. That
Yeah,
should be par for the course. Like, of course you
yeah,
have a functional website. Like, why are we talking about this? I will grant the whole thing about coordinating with the rest of the entire executive branch about how UAP reports should be happening was a big deal. We talked a few months ago about AARO's recommendations to the Joint Chiefs and how that filtered out to all the other branches, all the other services about how things should happen. And the AARO report this year does show they are getting more reports than they were in the past. So I don't want to shit on everything they've done. Hey, getting the website working, yeah, absolutely. But it feels weird. Like put these up, like look how much we did. Like I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know.
You're
I'm looking
more
at the website now, and it's kind of cool to see more like confirmed videos.
yeah, you're a little more accepting of it than I am. I'm still a
It's
little.
true.
I still have a real bad taste in my mouth about AARO from Sean Kirkpatrick, and they're going to have to work
Yeah.
hard to move past that. And so far, what I'm
Yeah.
seeing is not a lot. But anyway,
Yeah.
okay. So that's his opening statement. He said we've done these
Okay.
things. At one point, one of the senators asks him about the public reporting mechanism that is not yet on the website, right? So last year we talked about this. They got the website up. Great. They got the military reporting mechanism, which arguably still has problems because it says you can't talk about classified things on the form, but the form is the only way to report things. So if the thing you're reporting has to do with a classified program, you cannot report it to AARO. A little unclear how that's supposed to work, but fine. But they asked, how will the public reporting mechanism work? Because you're supposed to deliver that soon.
Yeah.
And Kosloski says, the public reporting mechanism that we've decided to go with is going to look similar to the reporting mechanism that we currently have for historical events, where we're going to ask folks to go to our website, download a PDF form, put in the narrative for their account, and then email that to us with accompanying media. Usually it'll probably be imagery. We went with that option because we thought, one, we could do it rather quickly. We could do it very efficiently. We could make it cost effective for the taxpayer. But also, we think we can gather all the data that we're going to need to conduct with our analysis, and then we're going to have that feed into an automated processing system that will cross-correlate that against all the other public reported cases, as well as U.S. government cases.
Okay. So, ignoring the whole PDF form and emailing thing, which is like, I am very interested to know how they're going to deal with a flood of public reports, how they're cross correlating that, because that sounds like a whole lot of like hand wavy magic. Is it going to go into a separate database to avoid clogging up their clean, nice data?
Right?
Just like tons of questions. And in some ways, I get why Lou wanted to start with just military.
Yeah.
We're a mess.
If you set up a reporting mechanism for military personnel, you can kind of expect that you won't get a lot of trolls. That's just kind of their job. They're expected to be professional. If you set up a public reporting mechanism, you're going to get some hot garbage. Like, you better be ready for that. So I'm with you on the PDF thing. Like, I rolled my eyes at it too. But the alternative is a web form, and any web form is going to be open to spam. Like, it's immediately going to cause a problem, and I don't blame them for being like, we're not even opening the door. If you can't fill out a PDF,
it's over. Yeah, and just like the fact that it's in a PDF means that there is someone in a room somewhere transcribing this shit.
Yeah, for sure. It raises a ton of questions, like you said, and I would love to see them talk more about it. But yeah, it definitely a mess taking reports from the public. They also asked about, he talked about like sharing data and partnering with universities. They said, how is that going? He said, our partnership with universities is lacking right now. We have some one-off associations with university professors.
Avilobe.
However, that's our fault, and it's largely because of the need to declassify data. We need to give the professors something to work on before we can really engage them. So we're working significantly on declassification effort. We have hired a number of declassification experts, and we're going to be trying to get cases declassified so we can engage with the universities on a regular basis and provide them with data. Talking to a scientist without data is going to be rather disappointing. So hopefully in 2025, we'll be increasing those efforts.
Yeah. Every time I hear someone say, we've hired a number of X, or whatever, I think 0 is a number.
Yes, we have hired a number. Is it a positive number, Doctor?
Tell me more about this number. Anyways. So this, I mean, this sounds hopeful to me. Like AARO's going to start declassifying stuff for scientists. Like, great, right?
Kind of, sort of.
Okay.
Here's I'm willing to grant Kozlowski all the credit in the world here. Declassifying stuff is tricky. He talks
Yeah,
about this a little bit at the Media Roundtable. He said it's important to note that AARO does not unilaterally declassify information.
sure.
Instead, we work with the originator of a classified record to ensure that declassifying that record does not inadvertently harm national security, which can take time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad they're doing it. It sounds maddening and time consuming. So I have some pretty low expectations, but I'm still
Yeah.
glad they're going to try because the whole like UAPDF isn't.
I feel like there's a better system we could set up where maybe like the National Archives is responsible for getting all the UFO
Yeah.
documents, and
So
maybe they
like
have a
JFK
mandatory
style thing.
declassification. Yeah,
Yeah.
JFK style. We, you know, what we
Uh-huh.
could do, we
Yeah.
could set up like a presidential review board and get a bunch of
Yeah.
experts in who
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
in
Yeah. Yeah.
charge of saying this should be declassified or this shouldn't, and here's why. I don't
Someone
know.
should propose this to Congress and the Senate. Someone
I
high
think this
ranking.
idea has legs.
Yeah. Yeah, let's do this.
All right. Um, I'm just going to say, I just noticed we've been recording for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
In my head, last week's episode was going to be the big one, talking about the
Uh-huh.
UAP hearing in the House. And this week was going to be kind of a shorter one. And like,
Yeah.
we've still got quite a bit in the notes doc here.
Yeah. When it took me an hour and a half to read through it the first time, I was like, oh, boy, this is going to be a big one.
So, first of all, during the Senate hearing, AARO shared 3 unresolved cases. Now, this is the first time they have done this.
Okay.
AARO has shared cases in the past, but always it has been cases that they resolved with like one exception. Dr. Kirkpatrick very early on shared a video of a metallic sphere taken in Mosul, and he was like, we don't know what the hell this thing is. But almost everything they have shared has been, hey, we figured this thing out and it was just a trick of the light. Like, don't worry about it. So very interesting to have him kind of called to account in the Senate by Gillibrand and say, here are 3 of the cases that we are currently investigating. He says, the first one was brought to us by a law enforcement officer out west, where he observed a large orange orb floating several hundred feet above the ground. When he got closer, the area was well lit, and he saw a blacker than black object. He said it was about the size of a Prius, 4 to 6 feet wide. It tilted up about 45 degrees and then shot up vertically. He says 10 to 100 times faster than any drone he's ever seen before. And it did that without making a sound. It emitted very bright red and blue lights that illuminated the inside of his vehicle as brightly as fireworks or street flares. So that's anomalous because of the size and the vehicle with the great acceleration.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want so many more details about that. Like, uh, was the blacker than black object the thing emitting like red and blue lights? How
Right?
fast did it go? How did it not make a sound? Did they get dash cam footage? Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. It's a little frustrating that you just kind of like teased us with it. He doesn't say anything about how much evidence they have or
Yeah.
anything. But yeah, I do appreciate this is genuinely anomalous and we're
Yeah.
looking into it. He says, quote, another one comes to us from the southeast US. 2 cars of government contractors were leaving a government facility around 9 o'clock in the morning. They looked up in the sky and saw a large metallic cylinder about the size of a commercial airplane, and it was stationary. They observed that there was a very bright white light behind or around the object. They saw it stationary for 15 to 20 seconds, and then it disappeared. Obviously, an object that large, stationary, unless it's a blimp, is unusual, but then disappearing, we can't explain how that would happen.
Yeah. Huh. That's so interesting. A thing I've always wondered about when witnesses say they see UFOs disappear is like, are they are they turning invisible or like blipping into another dimension or taking off so fast we can't register it, or like what's the
Yeah.
mechanism there?
No, 100%. I've always kind of wondered because we talk about how fast they move.
Mm-hmm.
If some of the ones that disappear are actually just like going ungodly fast and our eyes just like didn't register. It was here and then it was gone. I don't
Right.
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I wanted to leave like that Bugs Bunny shaped cloud of smoke,
Yeah.
whoosh.
Yeah. Yeah, but some of the things that we hear from like near science fiction
Mhm.
would kind of appear to be that if they were,
Mhm.
folding space time or whatever.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
a lot of those also have like side effects like destroying everything around them. The
Yeah,
little things.
lighting the atmosphere on fire, no big
It's
deal.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Dr. Kozlowski again, quote, the last case was interesting. We had an aircraft that was flying parallel to another aircraft and was
Okay.
capturing imagery of it, and a small looking object appeared to fly between the two of them much faster than them. We think that the object might have actually been further away than the object that was videotaping, but it requires very careful analysis to come to those conclusions, and we don't have the metadata to support that yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Perspectives in video are just so challenging. Like, I know that a lot of cameras have LiDAR or IR
Mhm.
sensors just for like focusing, but I don't think we actually record that info.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be really
Well,
interesting if
and the
we did
fact that
start
they
doing
were
that.
Yeah, and the fact that they were photographing the other airplane implies that this was like a commercial photo shoot with like regular cameras, not like military
Right.
grade sensor
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
pods,
Yeah.
but who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, if our iPhones started storing that LiDAR data,
Hmm.
um, could be
Yeah,
really
for sure.
interesting.
So that was the exciting part of the hearing.
Okay.
We're now
Those
going
are
to get
fun.
to a slightly more frustrating part. So
Okay.
he spoke about those cases for about as long as it took me to read those quotes to you. There were no
Okay.
slides, there were no photos. He was kind of like off the cuff, like, yeah, we got these three cases. He also talked about three resolved cases. He talked a lot longer and he had detailed slides prepared for all of these.
Yeah.
Again, it doesn't mean anything necessarily,
Yeah.
but it kind of speaks to intent when you are very prepared for the debunking and you're kind of winging it for the, yeah, we're still looking into that. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, so they shared three resolved cases. The first one, Dr. Kozlowski says, a case that we thought would be a transmedium case, as it was reported, is well known on the outside, known as the Puerto Rico case, which was data collected in 2013 when a Customs and Border Patrol aircraft observed an object flying near an airport in Puerto Rico. In this case, it looks like it goes from the air into the water, then back into the air. We assessed that it was actually flying over the airport the entire time, and this video was taken with infrared, and what appears to be the transmedium part, where it goes into the water, is actually where the temperature of the water is equal to the temperature of the object, and the camera can no longer distinguish between the two. It's not that the object actually goes into the water. And so we assessed that the object, likely a pair of balloons or sky lanterns, was floating at about 7 knots over the airport and descending to about 200 meters. He had this like complicated chart that basically showed how the plane circled around it, and he mapped out this proposed path where it was over the airport the whole time and showed the angles of view.
Hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Have you ever noticed how the sky around military bases is like just chock full of swamp gas and balloons and like it's really mysterious.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. They're like balloon magnets. It seems like an issue.
Balloons are really interested in nuclear facilities.
Kozlowski says he seems to kind of sense that we were going to be a little wary of him debunking everything. He says, to be clear, AARO does not believe every object is a bird, a balloon, or a UAV. We do have some very anomalous objects. It's just the nature of resolution. We can only resolve things that we understand.
Yeah, it's all ducks.
It's all
Uh,
ducks.
so yeah, okay. There are some things I like about this, and I appreciate the humor of it. Like I do appreciate that he said kind of repeatedly that he does believe UAP are real. But like, yes, by definition, you can only explain the explainable ones. Like,
It's kind of what it means.
yeah, like what I worry about is the like emphasis the public emphasis they put on the explained ones while shrugging off the weird ones.
Yeah.
Saying like we just don't have enough data, and then letting the public's inclination to dismiss it just like
Absolutely.
finish the conclusion for them.
Yeah, when every graph and every chart that you show emphasizes the resolved stuff, and when you're talking, you present detailed photogenic slides for the resolved cases, and you just kind of wing it about the new ones. That doesn't mean that you're not taking it seriously, but you are absolutely presenting a public image that the public can kind of go like, oh, okay, it's probably all stuff like this. They answered these ones. These other ones they haven't answered yet, but I don't know. It's frustrating. Another one, he says, an interesting case, which I don't believe the public is familiar with, was captured in 2018 from a UAV flying in the Mediterranean, watching Mount Etna as it was erupting. Oh, cool. And it appears that the object is flying through the plume of superheated gas and ash. This was a rather difficult case to resolve. We had to pull in support from a number of intelligence community and science and technology partners, and even reach out to a volcanologist. And though it is through very detailed 3D modeling and pixel by pixel analysis of the object as it's traversing the clouds, they assessed that the object was actually 170 meters away from the plume and not flying through it.
So, I know you have some views on this, but I want to say that what he said about the detailed 3D modeling and pixel by pixel analysis sounds a lot like a technology we use in coral stuff called structure from motion, where you take a camera and take a whole bunch of shots as you swim along by a coral reef, and if you can figure out exactly how those images relate to each other, you can build a 3D model behind it.
Yeah.
But this hasn't really been possible prior to nowish,
Sure.
in like the last 5
Here's
years.
the thing.
It's kind of cool.
I don't doubt that they did call in experts. I don't doubt that they did look into it. And frankly, having looked at the video, I would not be surprised to find out that it was a trick of the light and the thing does not go through the plume. It isn't that compelling a video. What frustrates me is I have a general sense that when someone goes out of their way to talk about all the big words and fancy technology they used, they're kind of covering up the fact that it's a weak answer. If he had just come out and said, we used math to show that it was 170 meters in front of the plume, you might have some follow-up questions.
Sure.
If he says, we used structure from motion and pixel by pixel analysis and 3D models, and we talked to a volcanologist, you go, oh, wow, sounds like you did your job.
On their work.
He's expressed no additional information, but he's given you like a reason to think that something is more detailed than it would have been otherwise. It might be totally legit. I don't know, but it sure makes me a little bit suspicious,
Yeah, I get that. And it doesn't cover some of the other things like, how was it flying so near to a volcano? Like, what kind of thing was it?
Because they didn't answer that. They just said it didn't go through the plume.
Yeah, like there's some other little things in there. But okay,
Probably
you've been teasing this to me at lunch for like a week. So you mentioned that they debunked the GoFast video.
Yeah.
Okay. Lay it on me.
This is a little tricky. So Kosloski gets to this one. He says, okay, the GoFast video captured the public attention and congressional attention when it was made public in 2017. It looks like an object flying very fast over the water, very close to the water. Through very careful geospatial intelligence analysis using trigonometry, we assess with high confidence that the apparent object is not actually close to the water, but is rather closer to 13,000 feet. This diagram here shows, as the platform is flying and capturing the object, if it is closer to the platform at a higher altitude, a trick of the eye called parallax makes it look like the object is moving much faster. And so we've written a detailed paper on parallax, released on our website, so the public can literally check our math on this analysis.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Parallax is hard to, so like, I think that's great. If they have really released literally all the information they had so that people can double check their math, let's do it. That's what independent analysis is. So it would be nice
Here's the
if they
problem.
release that independent analysis at
They
the same
haven't
time.
actually released any data. What they've done is they have come up with a mathematical model that fits the images represented in the camera. They're looking at the same video we are. And to be fair, they're not the first ones to do this. A group called Metabunk has used trigonometry to prove that the object wasn't going very fast. And the NASA study group from earlier this year also put out a paper showing, hey, we use trigonometry to show this thing isn't going that fast. Here's the problem. They're very carefully debunking the video. And while I don't disagree with the math or disagree with the fact that parallax is tricky, we talked earlier about how it's hard to estimate how far away a thing is without a frame of reference. I find it really suspect that they're so focused on debunking this one video while ignoring all of the broader context of the Nimitz case as a whole, right? Multiple military witnesses, radar data, additional videos. And here's the thing, I'm not the only one who feels this way.
Yeah.
Senator Gillibrand's opening statement, she says, I look forward to your presentation of 3 case studies, because she knew he was going to do the GoFast video. I look forward to your presentation of 3 case studies demonstrating cases that AARO has resolved, including the GoFast video, which is one of the most prominent UAP cases. However, I believe it is important to acknowledge ongoing public interest in the Nimitz incident, the gimbal video, and other prominent UAP cases, and for AARO to share what it can about those cases as well.
Awesome. So she knew he was going to pull this shit and tried to head him off at the pass.
Yeah.
I love it.
Look, I get it that you found a plausible answer for one of the pieces of data from this case, but like, it's not case closed, boy.
Yeah.
Former Marine Corps intelligence analyst Sean Munger tweeted about this. He said, from the presentation at yesterday's Senate hearing by Dr. Kosloski, it appears to me that AARO did not resolve the UAP event commonly known as GoFast. Unanswered questions remain. What was the object? Where did it originate? Where did it go? Etc. Instead, AARO simply addressed the name of the file, GoFast, and concluded that it was not going fast per se. Furthermore, it is my understanding that AARO did not communicate with the flight crew that took the video, which implies that the AARO investigators lack a full situational awareness of the incident.
Ooh.
In any proper investigation, it is imperative for the fact finder, in this case AARO, to know the totality of circumstances leading up to the recorded video, as well as the events that occurred following.
That is so good. It was not going fast per se. Like,
right? Case closed, you guys.
Yeah. Oh my god. So he said that AARO didn't talk to the flight crew. That seems like a pretty important detail.
One would think. You'll remember our old friend, former Navy pilot Ryan Graves. He said, quote, I spoke to the weapons system officer who recorded that video a couple weeks ago, and he confirmed that no one from AARO spoke to him. I think it's important to raise the point that AARO's lack of conversation with witnesses on videos they are attempting to resolve indicates that they are simply finding technicalities to resolve video evidence versus looking for the truth.
Yeah. This is I feel a little less hopeful. It's a little disappointing.
Here's the thing.
I don't know.
You're not wrong about what you said earlier. Trigonometry exists. Parallax is hard. Maybe the object isn't going fast.
Sure.
All of that is valid. But there's a broader context here.
Yeah,
Ryan
right.
Graves continues. He says, specifically, the GoFast video itself was never really interesting because it was going fast. The pilots didn't say that, nor did they name the video file. If anything, the Pentagon simply debunked their own name for the video. What is interesting, what is anomalous, is that video was captured within minutes of the gimbal video, and it just goes to further show that there were many more objects operating in that area than the first video shows. I don't think everything is being taken into account. I think if the AARO office actually spoke with the pilots that were involved in that incident, they would know that the objects were part of a larger formation of objects, and thus very anomalous to be operating 300 miles off the coast within 50 miles of a U.S. aircraft carrier.
Yeah. Yep. But just always remember, if not this year, keep trying next year and the next and the next.
Yeah. Here's the thing. We talk about this all the time. It's still a very exciting time, right?
It is.
The worst day of a congressional hearing with an obstructionist Pentagon UAP program is still super exciting and more information than we've ever had. The fact that I can sit here on a podcast with you and talk to you about the fact that the Pentagon's official statement that this video doesn't show anything anomalous is suspect because of the broader context, and have you be like, yeah, you're right. That's a real sign of where we're at with this topic. And I think it kind of goes back to what Kosloski said earlier. UAP are real. That isn't the discussion anymore.
Yeah.
Right? They're mysterious. We don't know what they are, and we need to keep looking. And the only people that I am super suspicious of are the people who are going, nothing to see here. And I'm a little worried that Kosloski is edging in that direction.
Yeah.
Now, I'm holding out judgment on the guy, right? We didn't throw Sean Kirkpatrick in the trash overnight. We spent a long time looking for reasons why maybe he was not being given everything he needed. I hope Kosloski turns out to be better. As we mentioned earlier, it's very encouraging that he was part of the UAP task force, which means he worked with Jay Stratton, which means he was probably recommended for the job. The fact that he's making public statements that there are genuinely anomalous UAP cases that he has no idea how to explain is great.
Yeah.
I have some issues with how he is presenting his information. I have some issues with how he is seemingly looking for points to put on the board that they're resolving cases, but I'm still technically willing to hold out hope, and I still think it's an exciting time. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, on a on a week that you thought was a fairly small week, we have now recorded for almost 2 hours.
True story.
Compared to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a very exciting time.
It's a very exciting time.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on It's a Very Exciting Time. You can find show notes and more on our website, veryexcitingtime.com, as well as links to our Discord and social media accounts. Oh, we got to make a shirt up with a duck flying a UFO.
Absolutely. Continuing with the outro, you can feel free to email us at Scott or Chuck at Very Exciting Time. And if you'd like to support the show, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
Indeed. And Chuck, as always, my wife thanks you for listening to me talk about UFOs for 2 hours so she doesn't have to.